Hello, it's the Great Canadian Beko here, coming to you with another update to the Alberta election forecast. So this is the last week of the election we are getting into. So there's potentially not much more movement left to see. We'll see though. I will stress here, we are in the, I think, potentially a start of another movement wave that started with the debate, but we'll get into that later in the video. Other thing I will shout out here at the top of the video, I am been doing a long running for the month of May political survey. I will be linking it in the pinned comment. So if you want to participate in that, feel free. It is anonymous and you are free to share it with anyone else you want to in Canada. I mean, I guess you could share it to anyone else, but I really want Canadian voters in it because that's what I'm interested in. But with no further ado, let us begin. So I'm now taking this scenario. This is my scenario 2 if the UCP tracks the Wild Rose Party. As probably my base scenario. I think this one is more likely. I don't think Smith will see as much polling error as Kenney had or the PC party before him had. I think she is still significantly underestimated in the polls. Or in other words, I think she's going to overperform the polls, which is basically what my whole model says. And I have lots of reasons for this. That's basically what my model does. The main thing that makes it interesting is it calculates this. If you don't like this kind of correction, there's really not much point of watching my channel or looking at my forecast other than my commentary. A lot of my stuff is based off of what my model says. Though, I will note, my model is not alone in how this is being forecasted. Many other models are in a similar ballpark. Obviously, they're not all the same, but similar ballpark. Like if you go to 338 at the time of recording this, to this projection, he has 50 UCP, 46 NDP, and 48 UCP seats to 39 NDP seats. And if you notice here, I have 4 seats within margin, like too close to call effectively. I have hashed them to show who has the edge, but they're really, really close. So we're basically the same. And it's not even just him too. There's all sorts of other models out there. You can find one that shows you whatever you want. But I'm pretty confident in this. I think this is probably the very most likely scenario. Though, for shame's sake, I am continuing the other scenario, which should be this one. Or is it this one? It's this one. And this is if the Smith's UCP follows the same polling trends that the PCs and Kenney had. If this is the case, and we see something like this, this is a decisive win. I think Noli's probably going to resign. And the NDP probably won't be able to challenge the UCP for another decade. Noli's really the strongest candidate they have, and it's very unlikely they could get someone better. That said, I don't think this is the most likely scenario. Pardon me, I need to go this way. This one seems to me more likely. Now, you might recall last week I was talking about, so this would be the 14th update. The election is tightening. And if nothing changes in the last week, we might see the NDP be in the capacity of winning. And we did get an inkling of this. We look at either of these scenarios, the UC's lost about 0.9 in both scenarios, and the NDP has gained about, let's say, 0.8. So a significant tightening did occur. We are talking about 2 percentage points closer than it was, give or take. However, if we look at seats, yes, there has been 2 seats tighter in the scenario 1, in the best case scenario, let's call it, for the UCP. But in the average case scenario, it's only tightened 1 seat, not that much. And it's Though that is a bit obfuscated because you see there's actually a lot of seat changes. One seat's been flipped in Calgary, 2 in Edmonton, but the NDP have lost 2 seats in the rest of Alberta. To the point, actually, if we look back at this scenario, there's only one last seat in the rest of Alberta that could go anywhere, and Lethbridge West is actually competitive right now for the UCP. And I'll be clear, if this scenario is correct, the UCP could, in principle, walk away with 60 seats, because Lethbridge West, these 2 in Calgary, Calgary Southwest, and Sherwood are all close enough that a good turnout on election night could flip them. If this scenario is correct. If we go back to this scenario, none of that is true. So, there is some wiggle room here. Some things could happen. Now, the real big question, though, is why? Why did the trend not go the way I forecast it was going to go? Well, it looks like a couple of things. So if you remember the coverage from last week, I outlined the 3 big May surprises the NDP threw out at Smith. And they ended the week with one about healthcare. It's looking like the one they ended with healthcare was an extremely weak and actually hurt their own narrative. It derailed the damage that could actually happen. Because yes, if you look at polling, healthcare is one of the biggest issues in the election. But if you also look at more detailed polling when it occurs, it's not that frequent, so we don't have a recent data point. But usually, it's mostly NDP voters who are really, or liberal voters. We're talking about a federal level. Let's call it left-wing. It's the left-wing progressive types who are particularly concerned about public delivery, public funding. That duopoly. Most people open to voting for the right usually don't care that much about those two things. They just want affordable, quality service. However that happens, they don't really care. If they have to pay out money out of pocket, but the service is really good and it's not that wildly expensive, whatever. If the service is amazing, but they don't have to pay anything out of pocket and it's all through taxes, whatever, that's great. We don't care. That's pretty much how the Canadian right thinks. They don't care how the system works as long as it works and doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So this derailing of their own attack line into healthcare, away from her comments vis-a-vis poppies, vis-a-vis vaccine passports, actually disarmed and defanged NDP's attack last week. And it gave Smith an opportunity to recoup ground. Because while that attack probably is really good at motivating turnout for the NDP, the one on healthcare, that is, that's not how the NDP wins this election. The NDP can't win through turnout. There's just not enough voters, progressive voters in Alberta to win an election on turnout. They need to convert moderates or discourage conservatives from voting. If they can convert conservatives, I guess that'd be good too, but that seems very unlikely. So by attacking along these grounds, vis-a-vis healthcare, not only do you kind of confuse and remove the big one that might keep voters away from the UCP or wedge them away, you now actually might wedge them back to the UCP because a lot of moderate Albertans, if you look at polling when this comes up, they aren't that terribly concerned about how the healthcare system works. And then once you look even a little bit into Smith's comments and you find out she's basically just describing how the French healthcare system works, one of the top 3 in the world, I think, for outcomes, how can you really be upset about that? It doesn't make any sense. It's much better than our healthcare system in pretty much every metric. I think they spend slightly more money, but they get way better results, lower wait times, less complications, better visit rates. Is that a bad thing? Because most of the left wing in Canada wants to spend more money in the healthcare system anyways. And it's all public money being spent, for the most part, in France. All necessary treatment is publicly funded. I mean, we're also talking about France here. This is a nation that is, quote-unquote, infamous for being socialist. The right is socialist in France. If you look at Le Pen. But that's not the only thing that I think is really hurt the NDP's capacity to pull ahead this week. I think it was a big factor, and it has definitely reduced their gains. But it's not the only one. Well, okay, so we've had a lot of polls this week. And I think it'd be easy to describe it by looking at the list of polls. So, right here, this is where we are before the election starts. So as you can see, slight NDP lead, maybe some UCP lead. Let's say overall a tie for 2023. Then we go through the election. This is week 1. UCP goes into a major lead in the polls overall, with only this one Abacus poll being a wild outlier. But it's not an outlier. I'm phrasing that wrong. This is week 1. This is week 2. Bad dates. Anyways, week 1, the UCP pulls into a lead. Solid lead. Week 2, this is when the comments happen. And as you can see, we have an Abacus poll, we have the Sovereign North poll, already a 6-point shift in Sovereign North. Main Street's had a 1-point shift. Not a lot, but Main Street's rolling, so it's going to get worse. And we get around here to Main Street. We get council fares come out. And at the end of the week, we have Main Street at only +4. And that's the end of last week. Or 2 weeks ago. Then this is after my last video. These polls come out. This Angus Reid poll. This Angus Reid poll comes out. This is big news. This is the first one after really the whole last week had finished. And we see this. And we went from being the UCP on a negative trend to a muddled trend. It's not clear where this is going. Main Street keeps trending away from the UCP. As to the debate, it's a tie. But a lot of these other polls, like Abacus here, is trending the other way. Sovereign North is tracking the other way. Where are we going? Hard to say, but since the debate might be the most consequential debate in recent elections. Look where Main Street is the day of the debate. Look at Main Street 3 days later. With no sample before the debate. And we're now back to a UCP 5-point lead. So what seems to have happened is their momentum, the NDPs, slowed down last week going into the debate because they confused and muddled their own attacks, and their advocates chasing around UCP candidates made them look foolish. And the UCP smartened up and had a smarter, tighter campaign. And then we go into the debate. And the debate appears, it's early yet, so I don't want to over stress it. But it appears the debate sealed the election. By Main Street's tracking, people tend to see that, or the perception is that Smith won the debate, and it was a debate Notley needed a clear win on. If the polls, as we saw by Sovereign North and Abacus, tightening, going away from the NDP, with that happening, Notley needed a clear win. But Smith seems to have gotten a clear win based off the polling we have so far, based on the media perception so far. Now, the reality with the debate and who won, who lost, it's really murky, and it's kind of hard to really call what that actually is. But if the perception is this, I guess that is the case. And if Smith has won the debate, going into this week, the last week of the campaign, we could very well see this go from this trend where the race tightened from the 14th to now. It might untighten. We could conceivably see that by the 29th, I think it is very possible we could see. Let me just scroll this up here so this is easier to see for you guys. Here we go. Let's go back. This is a possible result that could happen again, all the way back to April 2nd here. 54-33. Will it happen? I don't know. I'm not going to declare that is a guaranteed or a given. That is still within my upper band of potential win. But if we are seeing the UCP going through momentum right now, and if that momentum builds up, if Main Street's tracking is correct, and it's confirmed by people like Abacus, Janet Brown, or Angus Reid, probably not Angus Reid, they probably won't do another poll, maybe Ledger, or whoever else does another poll. If we see some of this trend confirmed, and it's trending UCP strongly, especially if we see here, and Calgary tightens again, going back all the way to April 2nd when it was a clear UCP lead in Calgary. If that happens, the election's going to be a rout. And it won't be a rout in the sense that the UCP will have outperformed 2019. That's effectively impossible at this stage. But do not confuse this. If the NDP goes from having potential win to even losing by 11 seats, let alone losing by 14 seats or 15 seats, if one of those scenarios happens, there is really no salvaging this worldview. Not the worldview, sorry. The narrative. The NDP was thrashed. Because keep in mind, this is what the election looks like right now. It looks like if we were to just look at the polls since the election was called, it looks like the UCP are clearly ahead. What a big deal. Well, we go back all the way to 2021, 2022, before Kenny resigns. And we're looking at 12, 15, 10, even this Common Ground poll. This is a company I've never heard of before, so I have no idea how good they are. But this one had a 23-point lead. This Ledger poll had a 21-point lead in May 2021. You're going from landslide level NDP wins, where they probably sweep every single riding in Edmonton, every single riding in Calgary pretty much, and Lethbridge, Lesser Slave Lake, possibly Red Deer. Utter landslide. Just to do some quick math, it might be nearly 60 seats NDP. That was a potential possibility if the polling was correct in some of these 2021, 2022 polls. If you're going from that to the UCP walking away with above 50 seats, after pulling out all of the dirtiest tricks in the book, all the negative campaigning you could, that's defeat. And it might very well break the NDP, like the actual party in the province, for years. this is not certain, but it's very possible that this kind of defeat, especially if you're seeing something like the Greens or the Liberal Party or the Alberta Party do well, which, to be really clear, it'll be hard to do well for any of those parties. They have very few candidates. I think it's like the Greens have like 40 or something. So their well is very hard to get because there's just not a lot of people to get votes for them, that is. But if we do see a massive rout, I don't think Notley will have the political capital stay on. And also, she's getting fairly old. She will be 62 by 2027. It's not unheard of for politicians to keep running after that, but that's pretty rare, especially after 2 consecutive losses after being premier. 1 loss after having a 20-point lead, or if we want to be more conservative, let's say a 10-point lead back in 2022. Going from a 10-point popular vote lead to trailing by, let's say, 5 on election day, that's pretty bad. You fumbled that really hard. Now, you could also argue, more charitably, the NDP never had a chance to win. In which case, then it doesn't really matter if Notley retires, because they never had a chance to win under Notley right now. Why would they ever have a chance later? At least in the foreseeable future, when Notley will be healthy enough to actually want to govern. If we're looking at 10 years in the future, do you think 68-year-old Notley wants to be premier? Probably be 70-year-old, actually, if we're looking at 3 cycles. Or 10 years. I don't think so. I wouldn't really want to be premier at 70. Or 68. Or 66. And if you're premier at 70 and then you serve a normal term length as premier, about 8 to 10 years, she retires at 80? No. I don't think it's going to happen. That's just not really an age range that governs in Canada. So then we have the interesting question of what happens next. Who takes over for the NDP in Alberta? And I don't really know the answer to that. If you are hip and up to the know of the people in the Alberta NDP who has power and who has good influence, let me know in the comments below. I'd be really interested to see who might take over, because it seems to me that if Notley does retire, which I think is very likely, following a loss, that is. If she wins, she won't retire, obviously. But if she does lose, as I think she is currently looking like, she likely retires. And then I'm not sure if the NDP is going to be a serious threat for 10 years. One of the reasons they are a threat right now, I really need to stress this, is Notley herself. She is carrying the NDP brand in Alberta on her back. And really, to no fault of her own, she really doesn't have a chance. 2015 was a fluke because the right was split almost perfectly. If just 30% of either the Wild Rose Party voted PC or vice versa, that party would have won. That's how close 2015 was. We're only talking about 100,000 right-wing voters flipping to the other right-wing party. That's extremely close. And the NDP would have lost while having the plurality of the popular vote in that election. Now, this is not to discredit her as a politician. She's a capable, good politician. She's made the NDP a serious force in Alberta. But I don't think it's enough. Seems a bit too early. And while she might have the skills to build the brand after that debate performance, I'm not really sure if she has, in this campaign, to be clear, I'm not sure if she has the plan to actually win an election. This NDP campaign has basically just been negative attacks on Smith. And a big risk of that is when you start setting up all these big negative attacks, calling her crazy, calling her far right, some people even calling her Nazi, not actually official NDP messages, but supporters on places like Twitter and stuff. When you have that harsh rhetoric going on, and you have a debate, and Smith comes across as a cool, collected, normal woman, you destroy your own campaign. How are you trying? It's the same mistake Trump made in 2020. Trump made many, many mistakes in 2020, but this is one of the big ones he made. He spent a lot of his campaign energy trying to portray Biden as weak, feeble, demented. By demented, I mean has dementia. That may or may not be true. I'm not a doctor. I don't want to diagnose someone from a distance. But we all seen the videos, so maybe it's true. The issue is, when you make this a big part of your campaign pitch, and then through whatever means, Joe Biden pulls out adequate debate performances. They weren't stellar. They weren't the best debate performances in the world, but they were fine. You've undermined your whole campaign. The undecided voter looking at this being like, is Joe Biden does he actually have Alzheimer's? And you're like, no, he seems fine. Well, you're not going to get it. And the other big issue that Notley's making right now, which again, Trump made in 2020, is she's not really running on anything. Most of the campaign that I've seen through official posts from the NDP on Twitter, through the media, things that the actual regular Joe Blow might see, also the debate performance. Because yes, you can go through the platform and you can probably find all sorts of policy the NDP wants to do, but that doesn't actually matter if people don't see it. What matters is what people perceive and see. So I'm going based on comments I've seen, media I've read, debate, and stuff that disseminates through Twitter. And even the Twitter stuff might be too terminally political junky. But of those, you mostly just see attacks in what the UCP is doing is bad. So like, the UCP are going to destroy healthcare. UCP didn't build enough schools. Okay. Great. What are you going to do? How are you going to be better? And that's the issue. Pardon me. Now you might say, oh, but isn't the UCP campaign also pretty negative? Like, they're going on about how Notley did all these bad things when she was premier. And yes, there is some to that. But it's not just that. They also have things like the arena deal. They're going to... what's the best phrases? I don't have the words right now. Pardon me. But the UCP campaign, through the media I'm seeing and through the debate stage, is more about the vision for Alberta's future, whereas the NDP campaign was more about attacking Smith. That's what matters to the individual voter. People vote for things, usually. But even if we want to go uncharitable and say the UCP campaign is as negative as the NDP in perception, that also isn't as bad. Negative campaigns work better as the incumbent. The really important thing to note is that negative campaigns discourage people from voting. That's their purpose. When you attack Smith as a Nazi, you are trying to convince people not to vote for you, just not vote for her. So if you do that and they don't vote, you haven't gained a voter. They've just lost a voter. Okay, so why is that better for the incumbent? Well, if you're the incumbent, you usually get what I call the status quo bias. In other words, there's a lot of voters who vote for somebody because they are currently the incumbent and everything is fine. It might not be fine actually, but for them it's fine. They have a doctor. They have a good job. They have a house. They don't want to rock the boat. Everything's good for them. There's a lot of voters like this. If you look at the GTA and you try to figure out how did the GTA go from almost no conservative seats in 2006 to handing a conservative majority in 2011, how did that happen? The same phenomenon. There was a lot of voters in the GTA who only care if things are just fine. Things were just fine in 2011. So they didn't. Either they voted conservative or they didn't bother voting. Whatever. Things are fine. I don't need to vote. So the negative campaign works better for the incumbent because if things are just fine, or the opponent hasn't given a better vision for the future, there is no reason to vote against the incumbent. And in a place like Alberta, where the Conservatives, by party registration, by affiliation, by vote history, make up the majority of the population, as long as they don't vote NDP, it's fine. They can stay home. But you're probably going to win anyways. And especially when you look at age breakdowns and you see that the... let me get it up here. My model has 55 plus voters, the people most likely to vote, breaking UCP plus 15 in this scenario. Plus 15. The youngest voters, under 35, are breaking NDP plus 4. The least likely to vote. And also, young voters, more so than older voters, vote for people they believe are going to do the best, have a good vision for the future. Whereas older voters vote more on partisanship, habit, party loyalty, etc. Young voters tend to mostly only turn out because they like the vision someone is putting down. So when you have a very negative campaign catering towards younger voters, it's not impossible for turnout to occur, but it's not very likely. Picture 2015 in Canada. Do you think Trudeau would have had a better campaign if he campaigned only on how Harper was terrible and not making Canada better? I don't recall what his exact slogan was, but it was like hope and something like that. What was his? Let me bring it up on my other screen here. Yeah, it was real change now. That's what it was. Hope was Obama, I think. The campaign was about, from Trudeau in 2015, making Canada a better place for people. Positive change. Do you think he would have had a better campaign if he campaigned on how Harper was terrible and evil? Probably not. And no, the Liberals won for the most part in 2015 because a lot of young voters turned out who don't normally vote. The NDPs has the same situation right now in 2023, but is doing the negative campaign. It might work. This is not to say it can't work. It just seems very unlikely. Because one thing I need to stress again is between the BAM, Lethbridge, Fort Saskatchewan, and then some of these other ridings in Calgary, the NDP can still get to 46. It's still within margin of error. They could still win. Especially if the polls are actually really relatively accurate. But if they're not, if they have the same accuracy that Alberta polls normally do, well, the election's over. We want to go back to here and we look at one of the better pollsters in the province, Janet Brown. She had it 51-40. Does that mean that is going to be the case? No. Janet Brown could still be wrong. Even really good pollsters get misses every now and then. It's just math. There's a 1 in 20 chance any poll is wrong. But what's more likely? That one of the better pollsters in the province is wrong. One of the better pollsters in Canada is wrong. Another one of the better pollsters in Canada is wrong. Another one of the better pollsters in Canada is wrong. Another one of the better pollsters is reporting the wrong trend. And another one of the better pollsters in Canada is wrong, because keep in mind, this is 47-49, but the actual regionals in it are really good for the UCP. I think it's like +8 Calgary or something like that. We could bring it up here, actually. No, that's going to take too much effort. We're not going to do that. What seems more likely, then? That Abacus had one fluky poll back in 9-12, May 9th to 12th, / the environment change. That could also happen, because keep in mind, that was during the height of the biggest May surprise. So maybe this poll is correct, and it just things regressed to the mean. It's also possible. It just seems, overall, right now, the UCP should win. Is it a given? I don't know. But with that, I'll wrap this up, and I will just say a reminder here that, barring something crazy happening, since everything should be set up now, and there's no more moving in my future, at least for 3 months, there will be a election coverage on the 29th. I hope to see you there. I'm not sure exactly when the live stream will start, but I will I'll try to update you on Thursday and or Sunday at the latest. With that, but otherwise, if you liked the video, by all means, like, share, subscribe. Comment below what you think. Think I'm right? Think I'm off? Think I'm missing something small? Think my writings look weird? Any of those things. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing, you can follow me on Twitter @BagelPolling. And with that, I bid you adieu, and I will see you Thursday with a Canada update.